Hello, my name is Jason Schmidt, and with me is
Elijah Zupancic.
And we're here to talk to you a bit about the MARA project, specifically our journey towards OpenTelemetry that we've undertaken over the last several months. Let's start with a brief introduction to OpenTelemetry to make sure that we're all kind of on the same page and understand what we are talking about when we discuss OpenTelemetry. As anybody who's worked in tech long enough knows, monitoring and observability are a huge part of managing a modern application. To this point, we've had a lot of different ways to do this, a lot of competing and conflicting products, and that's where OpenTelemetry kind of comes in to help cut through a lot of the mess. OpenTelemetry is standard-based. It has cloud integration with the major cloud providers. You can do automated code instrumentation within your applications. It supports developer frameworks. And there's no cardinality limits. And these are just some of the benefits of OpenTelemetry. The biggest benefit that we've seen is that OpenTelemetry ties together these disparate areas of observability, so tracing, logging, and metrics. And the promise is that down the road, we'll be able to use different technologies talking the same language that OpenTelemetry does to allow us to easily switch out different parts of the stack in the observability, monitoring, and logging space. Digging a bit into OpenTelemetry, some of the core concepts that you need to come to grips with, and that we did too, are the key elements that OpenTelemetry works with. There's tracing, and traces are built from spans emitted by services and provides you an idea of what's happening for a given operation. So for instance, if somebody goes to the website and brings up a view of a product, all the steps necessary to get from that click on the link to the product being displayed in the web browser can be traced out as one operation that you can then break down by spans and see where time is being spent. So it's a way to troubleshoot and see where your application is spending its time. Metrics is something that I think we're all familiar with, and that's a measurement about a service that's captured at runtime, amount of CPU, amount of memory, disk latency. Logging, possibly, the oldest ways of looking at metrics. It's a timestamp text record that's put out from an application. And it can be structured, it can be unstructured. And this is the kind of stuff you usually take and you ingest into a system like Elk or Graylog to look at later. And then OpenTelemetry adds the concept of baggage. Baggage is data in a key value format. It can be passed between spans, and it's contextual data that you want to add in above and beyond what's being generated by your application, or something that you want to add across all data that's being sent out from an application. So what are the core components of OpenTelemetry? Well, there's a spec, and that defines the OTLP protocol, the API definition, and the requirements for the various language SDKs. Sitting kind of at the heart of OpenTelemetry is the collector. That's a vendor agnostic piece of software, and the vendor receives, processes, and exports what it ingests via that OTLP protocol. And this is kind of where the magic happens within OpenTelemetry. We can feed data into the collector and tell the collector to expose that data in different formats. And that really aids the interoperability. So I can pull in OTLP data, and then I can go ahead and export it for Jaeger. I can pull in OTLP data, and I can export it in a Prometheus format. Also, as part of the core components are the language SDKs. There's an OpenTelemetry, Python SDK, Java SDK, and so on. And then one of the things I think we're going to talk a little bit more about later is automatic instrumentation. You can go through your code, you can manually create your spans, you can manually decide what data to expose, but there are some helpers out there. And that's the automatic instrumentation, where you can go ahead and say, add this to your Python component and get most of the benefits of OpenTelemetry without digging in too deep. So where are things at with OpenTelemetry? OpenTelemetry is still relatively young, but tracing is stable across the board. The API is stable, the SDK is stable, and the protocol is stable. Following right behind it are metrics. Metrics has a stable API and a stable protocol, but SDK support is kind of mixed. Some are in alpha, some are in beta. So your mileage may vary, and you need to look for the language you're using. And there's a pretty active and vibrant community behind each of these SDKs to help you if you run into problems. Logging is lagging behind. It is currently in draft status for the API and SDK, and the protocol is still beta as of right now. We're hoping to see this move forward in the next 6 to 12 months, but that's the last piece of the puzzle. And then baggage, that key value data, that's stable right now in the API and SDK, and there's no protocol associated with it. Elijah, do you have any thoughts on any of this so far?
Yeah, I would add that in the collector, not only is the exporter customizable, but the importer is as well. So you can send, say, open tracing data, or the collector can pull directly from Prometheus. So the input and output both can be of differing formats. So it's this amazing little brain that can glue together different worlds, that is an extensible tool for you.
That's a really great point, and that is just in the work we've done, and we'll talk more about this later. That's the piece that's making it much less painful than it could be, having done other conversions in the past. So at this point in time, we've talked about OpenTelemetry. Let's get into MARA. Let's talk about where MARA is in terms of its telemetry. The project is an active project. The project is something that we're working on. And we are nowhere near our end state as far as telemetry goes. Looking back at where we started with MARA, we forked the Google Bank of Anthos, and that was configured to use all the Google services, including CloudTrace. So our fork is called Bank of Sirius. And our challenges were to add management and monitoring. And that's what MARA is. It's all the pieces that support the Bank of Anthos. It's designed to support additional applications in the future, but our starting point was Bank of Anthos. So how do we add management and monitoring? And specifically in terms of telemetry, we need to move away from CloudTrace because we wanted to be agnostic in terms of our tracing. We want to determine how to best instrument and collect traces from the Bank of Sirius. And then we also wanted to be able to collect metrics and collect logs. Our considerations, I think everybody tries this, we want to avoid lock-in. We wanted to be able to switch between different observability technologies. This was very important to us because MARA is designed as a scaffolding to plug different pieces in and take pieces out. And if you watched our earlier discussion on MARA, we do talk about our need to pick protocols over products. If we can go with an open protocol, that really improves our ability to make changes down the road. So avoiding lock-in was important. We wanted ease of use, so reduction of friction for implementation. If we could do things automatically, we want to do that versus having to go in and code things ourselves. So avoiding lock-in, ease of use, visualization. It's important for us to be able to take that data and do something with it. I think many people go down the path of collecting a ton of data and then it sits there. And there's no way to correlate it. There's no way to mine it, but they have it. And then kind of tying right in with visualization is the resource use. How many resources to dedicate to telemetry? How much CPU? How much memory? When we're talking about data like log data, how much disk? And how long do you keep that for and at what granularity? So with all that in the back of our minds, we came up with our observability wish list. So the things we wanted to do is we wanted to have logging and tracing and metrics. Additionally, we wanted to do health checks. We wanted to be able to do runtime state introspection. We wanted to be able to get heap core dumps to go through and debug. And we wanted a way to process for exception and error logs, to aggregate those and produce notifications where necessary. And since this was a wish list, we went big. So here's all the things we were looking for. After we came up with that list, we started to look out there and see what was available. Who out there provides what we want? And this was a bit of a wake-up call because as you can see from this matrix, there are a lot of red X's. So there's a lot of things that aren't supported out there. So right off the bat, we realized things like runtime introspection and the ability to manage heap and core dumps and review them. That was off the table for now. Health checks were there, logging was there, but as you see, Very few of the products out there do all the things we want to do. And the ones that do all the things, like if we look at Grafana, we look at Elastic, we're kind of locked in to their product and their ecosystem there. And this is what sent us down the path of OpenTelemetry. And looking at OpenTelemetry, we realized that although it was a relatively new technology, although some of the parts were in beta or not mature, it was our best bet to move forward and to be able to do what we wanted to do, which was to not only be able to satisfy these requirements, but also to be able to have the flexibility to go forward and change things in the future. So as I alluded to, OpenTelemetry was the winner. It solves the bulk of our issues, but as I mentioned, some components aren't at the level of stability we'd like them to be. We can't find a lot of production examples out there, and it's overall new, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It just means that some of the problems we're hitting, we seem to be some of the first people hitting. So the solution for us with our work is we're going to use OpenTelemetry tracing. We're going to use OpenTelemetry as a collector, and that's in MARA right now for tracing. And then we're using other technologies as a stopgap. And we'll talk more about our use of ELK and our use of Prometheus. And being able to do it this way, we can do some benchmarking as we start to put OTel in for metrics, as we start to put OTel in for logging. We can see how that performs against what I consider the more industry standard pieces like ELK, like Prometheus and Grafana. So today, if you deploy MARA, the OpenTelemetry you get is confined to the OTel collector and the SDK that we're using in the Bank of Sirius for Java and Python to send traces out. Logging is the Elastic stack. Metrics are coming through Prometheus. And for visualization, we're using Jaeger to talk to the OpenTelemetry collector for tracing, and we're using Grafana to visualize everything else. Elijah, am I missing anything?
Well, I just add that when you're doing this comparison yourself, you can get dizzy pretty quickly because it's like comparing apples to toasters at times. There's so many things in that matrix that have this confusing overlap where they do parts of each other. And so it's not a complete, a clean comparison.
That's a good point. And I would add to that when we hit those weird areas of overlap, one of the tiebreakers for us was, is it an open protocol? Does the product have an open source variant? And like everything else in MARA, we tended to, all things being equal, go with the open source solution, go with the most open protocol, because in our experience, those are the ones that we have less of a chance of painting ourselves into a corner with. So the future of MARA, where do we see this going in the future? So our vision is to, one, integrate tracing into MARA. And we're partially there. We've done work with Bank of Sirius, but there's still more work to be done on tracing. Once we're able to do that, our next step is to start converting metrics over. OTel supports metrics. We have some examples that we've been looking at. Now it's a matter of going through and implementing these. And this is something that, like most of MARA, is going to be a voyage of discovery. And we will have problems and we will have failures. And we will most likely write about them and talk about them because, after all, the whole point of MARA is to do this in the public and show how easy, or more likely, how difficult it is to make these changes so people out there can decide how much effort to invest, and in some cases, if they should invest the effort. Once metrics are over, we're hoping we're further along with the log management within OTel. So we'll be looking at converting log management over. And then once that's all done, our next step is to what we've called operationalize OTel. That is to start using OpenTelemetry the way that we want to manage the application and to monitor the application. And that includes figuring out what kind of dashboards to do, figuring out what type of plugins or other ancillary programs we need to add in. But we want to show what it would look like to fully manage MARA using OpenTelemetry. Other areas of interest that aren't on the main line, but are things we're concerned about, the OpenTelemetry team, the community, has released a demo web store that's fully instrumented. We'd like to deploy that on MARA and show how to plumb an existing OpenTelemetry enabled application in our environment. We want to work with sending OpenTelemetry data to third-party services. We've already done some tests with Sumo Logic. We've done some tests with Lightstep. They've been successful. We'd like to go further down that road and see where that ends. And then we want to look at integrating OTel in other parts of our framework. Where does it make sense to put OTel, and can we put it there? In terms of the community, we are very excited to be part of the OpenTelemetry community. We recently attended OTel Day in Austin. And when we talked there, one of the things we pointed out is that we are very keen to track and adopt any OpenTelemetry enhancements. And as we adopt those, we want to extend that reach not only to MARA, as I mentioned on the last slide, but we want to talk to other groups within NGINX on adding OpenTelemetry. For instance, NGINX Service Mesh has OpenTelemetry already baked in. There are OpenTelemetry modules for NGINX. We want to keep working with that and see how far we can take it and see how easy or how hard it is to integrate that in with the rest of MARA and use those lessons learned to inform future actions. We're looking forward to contributing to OpenTelemetry projects. And then again, as one of the goals of MARA as a method for learning and exploring, we want to provide feedback. So talks like this, blogs like our blog series on MARA, and videos are our way of engaging with the community and providing some information on what we've done. So that leaves us with some challenges. And Elijah, I'm going to turn it over to you because you've been more at the forefront of doing the actual implementation of OpenTelemetry within our application, whereas I've been more involved with the back-end Kubernetes collector stuff.
So yeah, in terms of challenges, one of the first things we hit was, well, just how new everything is. Many of the SDKs for Java and Spring have recently just cut 1.0s or are still in beta. And you're noticing actually active development, which is really positive. But as a consumer, version to version changes, you have to be conscientious of. And then the next thing that really you'll hit is, are you going to take the road of auto instrumentation or manual instrumentation? I encourage everyone to try out auto instrumentation first and see if it meets your needs. Many people are a bit surprised by kind of like the jarring naming convention conflicts or the swath of coverage of auto instrumentation and kind of feel like it's an information overload. Those folks tend to go, hey, well, maybe I can put in traces strategically through my code about what I really care for. And then you get a beautiful, clean view when you look at the traces across services, because you've really isolated what it is you care about the most. Next up is just operational concerns. And in terms of CPU, memory usage, and overall performance impact, really, you're just going to have to benchmark and see. There's dials you can turn, like ratio of traced requests, but that gets tricky because you can't really set that per service. Well, you can, but you might not have services connect with each other because different ones got ratioed out if you're actually configuring it on the app. You can do some ratio tuning on the collector, but you really got to work with these dials if your performance is a concern. That said, benchmark and verify it for yourself. And then lastly, in terms of operational concerns, there's long-term data storage is a big issue, right? You can generate far more observability data than your application is generating. I mean, if you just go wild, I mean, you could have potentially petabytes of data. So you have to decide what you actually need to store, what you actually need to store to do like, historical analysis or to give you things that are actionable for your business. If you do have large storage requirements, you may want to investigate things like offloading it onto object storage or other strategies. And lastly, standards and best practices. I think they're emerging right now. There's lots of active discussions in the OpenTelemetry Slack channels and mailing lists, being involved with those communities, seeing what other people are doing, reading lots of the code. That'll help inform you about the good best practices. I don't think there's like just like a straight up list of you shall do this just yet.
Thanks, Elijah. And I'll just echo one of your last notes there, is that the newness of this world is offset by how easy it is to get involved. The discussions down at OTEL Day were great. The willingness of everybody to listen to each other was really great as well. So it is kind of a new frontier, but there is a very can-do feel about the whole thing. So for me, it's exciting to work with this and to feel like we can kind of get past a lot of, coming from an operational background, a lot of the pain around metrics and monitoring. If we can get past that, it really puts us in a much better place as we go forward in this world. So that's the end of this presentation. I'd like to thank everybody for listening. If you are interested in getting more involved in OpenTelemetry with the MARA project, nginx.com/MARA will take you right to the project. And we'd be more than happy to engage with you on the GitHub page. You can join our community Slack. There's a MARA channel there. Or if you're more interested in OpenTelemetry, you can visit the OpenTelemetry website and get involved there as well. Thank you for your time.